New Zealanders may look back on this week as the moment we began seriously reckoning with climate change. Cyclone Gabrielle forcing difficult decisions about managed retreat in the face of overwhelming weather.
I struggle to find words to express what I'm thinking and feeling about this particular crisis. I don't think I've ever felt as sad or as angry about the lost decades that we spent bickering and arguing about whether climate change was real or not, whether it was caused by humans or not, whether it was bad or not, whether we should do something about it or not, because it is clearly here now. We need to stop making excuses for inaction. We cannot put our heads in the sand when the beach is flooding. We must act now.
James Shaw in Parliament there. So will we, as a nation, decide to abandon land and communities that have been home to generations of families? It will be costly, controversial and challenging. And the man tasked with leading us down this path is Climate Change Minister James Shaw. Tēnā koe, welcome to the program. We just watched your impassioned speech to Parliament this week. Why this particular moment? What set this moment apart for you?
Just before we get into it, I do want to acknowledge that there are tens of thousands of people who have lost everything over the course of the last few days, and that the immediate priority must be on ensuring that they get the resources that they need to be able to start the recovery. So that has to be our top priority right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all acknowledge that, but we also have to look forward.
We do.
So what was it about this particular event that's made you make that speech?
It's not like we haven't had severe weather events before, but I think the scale and the intensity of this one and the kind of broad nature of it right across the top of the North Island, I think has really brought home that this is a taste of what is to come.
Okay, how do we know that this is a climate change event, not a weather-related event? What is the specific thing about it that says to you it's climate change?
We have gotten very good over the course of the last couple of decades at working out what portion of any given weather event is caused by climate change. So let me give you an example. 2 weeks ago, the last 1 in 100-year event that we had was those incredible floods here in Auckland and Northland, that's right. And that climate change added about 10 to 20 centimetres of rain. Now, the first 10 to 20 centimetres, you can cope with that, but the last 10 to 20 centimetres is a biblical flood.
Right, okay. What can be done right now? I mean, you're working in future-proofing, but is there anything that you as Climate Minister can do right now to help these people who are looking at either rebuilding in the same place or going somewhere else?
Absolutely. I think there are things that we can do, and I cannot emphasise this enough. If we move quickly in the immediate post-disaster recovery phase, that we can make decisions around how we rebuild our homes and our communities in ways that are actually better and stronger than they were before.
But how can you move quickly? These things take a lot of time. The clean-up takes a long time. People have been on these locations for generations, maybe, and they may not want to rebuild where they are after such a catastrophic event. But how can you move quickly? No building takes a short period of time.
No, but there are decisions that we can make that would help to accelerate some of those decisions. So let me give you an example.
Please do.
In Australia, they had those equally catastrophic floods a couple of years ago, and in some cases, what they did was when people got their insurance payouts, they actually were able to take that and apply it to new land and build a new home. We do have a problem here at the moment, which is that when people's houses are red-stickered and wiped out, they get a rebuild amount from their insurance company, but then they feel that they have to rebuild on the same land because the value of the land isn't included. So there are interventions that we may have available to us to enable people to move rather than to rebuild in the same
that's
location.
a problem, right? So you've got a private insurer saying you can rebuild your house, but we're not going to give you any money for the land. The land money might come from the EQC, yeah, but the two don't marry up together. And so you're stuck rebuilding in the same place. That's a flawed system.
This is my point, is that I think that there are interventions that we can make in the immediate future that would help us to rebuild.
So what intervention can you make? Can you change the law to bring that all together or to allow people to scoop it all together and move somewhere else?
Well, I'll be
I'm
meeting with the Prime Minister next week to talk through what options we have to accelerate our work around climate change adaptation to ensure that we do make some fast decisions. We learned a lot of lessons from the Christchurch earthquake and the rebuild there that we can apply to this situation here as well.
So you're acknowledging that the current system doesn't work?
Absolutely. That is why we have a National Adaptation Plan. I mean, we are the first government in the history of this country to have a plan for how we adapt to the effects of climate change. And what we really ought to be doing right now is thinking about in this immediate post-emergency phase, what elements of that can we accelerate to make sure that we do make better decisions about how we rebuild in the future? So
what time frame, I mean, you're going to brief the Prime Minister this week, what time frame can the people who are in that situation expect an answer?
Well, they need answers if they're going to be making decisions in the very near future about, where they're located, if they want to move their families. I'll give you an example. I visited a house that had been destroyed by the flooding a couple of weeks ago here. They got their children out of a second-floor window because the water was coming up over the top of their first-floor ceiling. I mean, it was an extraordinary situation.
Yeah.
They don't want to live there anymore because they know that if they rebuild in the same location, they will be putting themselves and their children at risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they need support to take their insurance payout and to work out, where they want to live in the future.
Okay. All right. Let's look a bit further down the track. The Ministry of Environment says 675,000 people, 1 in 7 people in Aotearoa, live in flood-prone areas, and that's $100 billion worth of residential property. Who's going to decide whether those people are going to have to leave in the future if we have to go down managed retreat? Yeah,
look, I cannot emphasise this enough. It has to be a local community-driven decision. The point of the upcoming legislation that we've got is to enable communities to make those decisions because the effects of climate change will be presenting differently in different places.
Okay, so the local communities are going to make those decisions, but then comes the question of who's going to pay for them to move. Who is going to pay for them to move?
Again, I can't emphasise this enough. The upcoming legislation has to deal with funding and financing issues.
Yeah.
At the moment, it's really unclear between the property owner, the insurance company, the bank, the local authorities or central government who pays for what portion and how much risk each of those people carry.
But surely you're working through this. That's what you're doing with the legislation.
Exactly.
And so which way are you going? I mean, can you give us any idea?
At the moment, no, because we haven't made final policy decisions, but those will come up in the next few months.
But other people are making suggestions to you, like, maybe this should be paid for by, say, a capital gains tax, or maybe it should be paid for by ACC levies. And the capital gains tax could be back on the table now that Jacinda Ardern has resigned. Are these options?
Well, I'm not going to play the rule in, rule out game with you, but we certainly need to not limit our options at this stage.
And how do you decide, if somebody doesn't want to leave what is deemed a managed retreat area, how do you persuade them to do it?
Well, like I said, this really has to be driven by local communities, and you have to make a decision based on your local circumstances and on what makes most sense in terms of value for money. So you do have options. You could simply, raise the house onto a raised dais. We've seen that, for example, around Edgecombe, where after the floods there, we had houses that were built on 2-metre-high daises out in the fields. There are some cases where, levees and seawalls may be more appropriate, and then there will definitely be places where we say, well, actually, the thing that makes the most sense is to relocate.
If you're going to compensate somebody from moving away from a coastal inundation area, or a flood-prone area, how are you going to ensure that the rich people aren't just going to get compensated for their wealthy properties, and the poor people who have no money to go anywhere have to stay? It's called climate gentrification. Is that something that you're going to try and avoid?
This is really important. This is a really important point. This is something that our government is deeply concerned about. And when we started the Climate Change Adaptation Work Programme 4 years ago, we actually made a decision as a cabinet that we would focus not on making sure that we covered every loss, because we actually can't do that, but on ensuring that we supported people in a hardship situation. So that has to be our top priority. All
right, so you've got two things of work, if you could just outline for me. A rapid response to maybe change how insurance is paid out or collated so people can move, and then you've got the other legislation. So the initial stuff that you're going to talk to the Prime Minister, that's the urgent stuff. That's what you're focusing on right now.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.